Thank you, Miss Spudnut, for your generous offering. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten. And for you mortals who wish to be spared and get your own recognition, I'd suggest joining the channel today. Or maybe even join the Patreon or Coffee if you so desire instead, those of which you'll find in the description. Now then, on to this year's findings. Welcome back, mortals! Here we are again at Halloween. Oh, my favorite time of year. As you know by now, 'tis the season when my power rises back to me and allows me the chance to explore the media from this realm, finding any and all sources of what can send fear to an average being. Oh, I just love the thought of these individuals cowering from the sight of what they've deemed horror. Seeing what could normally be a common standing being reduced to one who's left crawling with a reminder of what makes their very skin crawl. It just makes me giddy to think about. But what makes this year's journey different is that I now live with my own physical form, no longer requiring the possession of a generic vessel, and now with the ability to alter the online realm and this real realm as I please. Pretty nerve-wracking, wouldn't you say? So with this being my first chance in so long that I was given the means to enter this realm without calling on a vessel to do so, I was curious enough to learn more about that being I used to depend on, Nunny and Isness. And much to my interest, I see that he made his own attempt to explore some elements of fear for himself at one point. Though, as I already expected, the boy didn't have the strength to delve as deep as he could have. Honestly, I'm amused to learn he got a chilling, life-changing experience through Danganronpa of all things. Such child's play, if you ask me. Well, after seeing this for myself, I gained the drive to pick up from where he left off. I found myself quite intrigued to go deeper into this anime variety just to see what it's like. There seems to be quite a handful of some very promising material here, so I figured I'd pick out a greater, more eerie collection of moments that can send the heart beating and spine shaking. Here we go, mortals, on to another nightmare-fueled adventure from the atmosphere of anime. Enjoy yourselves. Since I'm feeling generous for a change, we shall start with an easy dip in this lake of fear, exploring some shows that lure their newcomers into a false sense of security, causing your minds to start a slow, agonizing sensation of twisting and swirling over time, and with no way of knowing what's reality or forged from your own subconscious phase until it's too late. Take School Live, for example. You may believe that no wrong would ever come from the likes of Yuki, such a cute and innocent girl with plenty of time to hang out with her friends and Toromaru, all while having some silly little mishaps in between from day to day. You'd think there's no way she could experience any dark-crushing impacts in her life, and you'd be right, assuming you see nothing wrong with a wave of zombies surrounding you from all directions and closing in on you, ready to put an end to your own life, with some of said zombies even being those you used to be close with. What's that? You do see something wrong with it? Oh, well, that's quite fascinating. Tell me more about the chills it sends down your spine. Anyway, it takes no challenge to understand the wonderfully grim fate that lurks around these heroines, and all with the probable risk of any one of them encountering that very fate at any moment and becoming one of them. Only for the others to have to be reminded of this despair all over again. But what makes this even more interesting is remembering little Yuki's perspective on this scenario. While these survivors struggle to keep what remaining time they have left preserving their safety from the zombies, Yuki, on the other hand, has gone down the path of a happy-go-lucky life, completely unaware of the desolate, lifeless reality that has shrouded her and everyone she holds dear. Even if some of those she holds dear only live in her head from here on, and now only serve the purpose of providing a drive to the school life club. But at one point, she does finally come to terms with her true surroundings, and poor Yuki all that time, while she spent her days casually talking to the voices in her head and fantasizing about those who are no longer around her, she and her life stand out as a pretty solid metaphor overall. Who knows what kind of world we're all really existing in? How much time is left before we're all met with an outcome as gruesome? Who can you really trust, and who will end up impaling that knife in your back? Or in this case, those teeth in your flesh? Kiki stands out in a similar regard. However, the locals of Sotoba have to encounter another form of doom looming over them, and you're also presented with a seat in a much closer row to give you a more clear picture of the pain this plague has caused for everyone involved. Just imagine seeing a casual, peaceful village like this one, only for it to be taken over by a vampire victim spree in mere days. Sure, from a distance, this may seem like an easier obstacle than school life. I mean, vampires can be easily vanquished by the common sunlight, wood stakes, etc. So that would make it seem like a cakewalk to survive in Sotoba through this condition, right? Oh, you mortals have no idea. With the surprising variety of well-shaded locations, and naturally those locations expanding via nightfall, it seems they have the upper hand. Not to mention the Kurashikis, the family that started this nightmare, have their right-hand man Tetsumi, who helps make survival even more of a challenge for these poor mortals who have nowhere to run. And all the while, this leans toward lines being drawn in the sand regarding the decisions and morality of everyone involved from either side, leading to bouts of downright insanity and conflict between friends and neighbors. As the numbers of casualties and transformations rise, there's bound to be another vampire showing up anywhere at any hour of the night. There's never a sign on whose thoughts or actions could lead to another, or even themselves getting bitten and joining those they once fought against for their own lives. And just when the survivors thought they were all safe, they couldn't be more wrong. For little Sanako made her getaway with the aid of her newly established guard, Seishin. And for all you know, they are still wandering about to this day, hiding and tracking down their next victims. Whether it's in their realm, or perhaps they found a way into your realm. You may never know. And speaking of misleading villages, Higurashi When They Cry has gotta be one of the most iconic examples of this variety. 'Tis a tale that holds some pretty spooky secrets behind Hinamizawa, another village that seems serene at first glance, and with plenty of interactions between charming, quirky individuals. That is, until the count of disappearances and demises starts piling up at a rather unusual rate through the flow of Oyashiro's curse, as they call it, as well as a few motives hiding behind closed doors. Now, with the word of this so-called curse floating around from mortal to mortal, that could also serve as an easier tactic for some rather interesting casualties, given that some of the residents here end up in situations dire enough to drive them over the deep end, and follow with extreme measures to accomplish their oh-so malicious deeds. And with the story going down multiple routes following different timelines and outcomes, there's no telling who will end up being the psychotic mastermind in each path. It could be Rena, or Keiichi, or perhaps Mion, or even her twin Shion. And the list doesn't even stop here. Anyone could be next, with each one having their own lives and motives extending to their own dark secrets. They're all very likely to snap and drag those causing their troubles, or even their own friends, through some painful, haunting experiences. And all with the chance of said experiences to end up probably being their last. And who knows what other troubles may penetrate their nerves, or maybe even yours, upon witnessing this journey. It's these kinds of stories from this realm that really put the trust of the protagonists, and by extension you, the spectators, to the real test. You might end up going insane by rationalizing just who might be in the right, and who will send the other to their grim fate. And all of this is just a sample of what's to come from that section, and it's only the beginning of our trip this year. What did you say? You weren't expecting our first path would go this deep? Oh, well, you know not even a fraction of the wonders I've encountered from this realm, do you? Well, that was all fine and dandy, but now I say we make this a little more interesting by going up a tad on the scare variety. We're about to go down a little branching path that delves into the art of transformation. Most nature enthusiasts would cause one to believe a procedure of this manner would always lead to something beautiful and graceful. And yet they always push away the side that shows the potential horrors that could come from it. Picture it as an unworldly Jekyll and Hyde scenario. Someone who was once human being turned against their will into something far beyond your understanding. Something that no one's ever seen before in their life. Nor would they have the time to learn about it, for they might be prone to falling as the next victim. Oh, the creativity I've seen from the variety of outcomes in this concept, and the looks of fear on the faces of those who are stuck to watching this wonderful nightmare happening in front of them. How delightfully terrifying! We've been given quite a variety of examples here, like through the workings of Parasite. A tale quite similar to what you mortals refer to as the working of John Carpenter, called The Thing, with alien creatures taking on the forms of any average being. The same can be seen throughout Parasite. You may never know who's to not be trusted until it's too late, and those victims are left with an abruptly shocking end by someone they didn't know they were truly talking to. Oh, and who could ever forget the wonder that was Akira? Watching on the side, you can sense the horrific images rushing through Tetsuo's head as he wants to fend for himself and keep Kaneda out of his way in the process. In an attempt to achieve such a feat, he searches to find the answers to Akira. Little did he know he would start going mad and follow down a rather dark path during his journey and the encounters he faces in between. All this would lead to multiple forms of pain and suffering to those involved, including Kaneda and even Tetsuo himself. That soul on his own may have shown aggression and might during his adventure, but it all comes back to bite him in the end. And what he experiences may just as well be the most beautifully unbearable and disgusting memories he and those around him ever had the misfortune of partially feeling for themselves. Oh, how fascinating this was to witness it for myself, and yet still live to tell it. Perhaps you recall that one occurrence from Made in Abyss, as Nanachi and Midi end up as victims of the dreaded curse lying at the bottom of the abyss. I know Nanian sure remembers, as he ended up putting it fairly high in his video, and I can certainly see why. Both of them end up showing their own signs of suffering from these effects, with Mitty horribly severed beyond belief, and practically having little chance of survival on her own in this new state, and Nanachi painfully aware of the fate that's about to come for her as the time passes, until it finally comes for them! Whew. Oh, my word. What was all that about? I haven't felt something like that in a while. It's probably nothing, mortals. Well, whatever. On to our next example. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with some of the Full Metal Alchemist field at least, particularly when Shu Tucker took the liberty and his last shred of humanity from within to not only complete his experiment, but also use Alexander and Nina, two different beings who used to look up to him, cared for him, and had hope he'd always protect them, only for him to shatter both their physical states for the sake of his own creation. With no way of them being able to return back to normal, their structures now both trapped in this form for all eternity, leading to a cause. Oh my, what's going on? All this is starting to send my head spinning a lot more than I was expecting. And it doesn't seem like the good kind either. I just can't understand where this kind of power is coming from. Well, it's probably nothing I shouldn't be too worried about. I'm sure I'll be fine for the time being anyway. Well, I say we move on to our next path. Right this way, mortals. From within these many fields of terror, there's bound to be some sort of driving force behind it. Whether it's a giant disaster caused by storms from different directions, or maybe just one random being pulling all the strings. And those are the types of beings whom I fondly commend. Picture this. Just one individual who may seem like any average being from a distance, only to have the thought process of one of the greatest criminal masterminds of their realm. They could have motivations as simple as common revenge on humanity, or as grand as causing a giant wave of loss and despair. Starting all the way from the ground up, and building an empire based on his or her preferences, with little to no hope of escaping the claws of this new particular realm's order. A lot of confidence these people have, and with a great outcome. How's about we start with a more simple example? Someone who's a little more down to earth, but still threatening enough to deserve her own spotlight. That one being Lucy from Elfen Lied. Her I found to be a bit of an interesting case. Her telekinetic powers allow her to take down her victims even when they think they're a safe distance from her. For many beings around her, be it mortal or Diclonius, it seems like there's no chance of escaping her grasp alive. Unless by the rare exception that she feels merciful, but even then, there's no telling what condition she'll leave you in. Though I suppose in a sense, a lot of her ruthless tendencies were kind of understandable, given the harsh past she encountered with all her prejudice experiences she faced as a child, all the way up to her betrayals, costing her the first relationship she could have had, and the loss of her first furry companion. So naturally, this would give her reason to physically lash out at humanity. Her origins admittedly may not have been pretty, but the fruits of her labor on the other hand, now that's a sight to behold. Just thinking about it, I feel like I'm staring around at an art museum. Oh, Lucy, the outcomes of your own anger really speak to me, in a rather creative way, too. And now that I think about it, while we are still hanging around this particular topic, why don't we go back to that Danganronpa show for a moment? I know Nunnian will watch this at some point when he wakes up, so why not give him a little haunting from his own past sharing? Besides, I've been taking my own notice on the side of the one and only Junko Enoshima. I recall recently having the honor of conversing with her myself and hearing her whole line of achievements she's committed herself to. And oh boy, I've come to love her line of planning. She's taught herself the art of blackmailing, all for the sake of convincing her fellow classmates to go after each other's throats, as well as their chests and their backs and, well, you get the idea. But the true beauty of her determination comes into play later on when she captures Nanami, does her in through a hall of traps, and hypnotizes all the survivors of Hope's Peak into a fit of mass insanity, including turning all Nanami's close friends to join Junko herself on the dark side, and even making them use their ultimate traits for her new world of despair, all for the intention of evil. This alone makes her person quite marvelous in my eyes, and yet her scheming didn't stop there. She even went as far as to trick the next gang of Hope survivors into becoming victims of her next trap by simply wiping the memories of everything, including helping her set her plan up. and all just to make them feel more dire in the situation that they set themselves in. Oh, how delightfully malicious this girl is, I tell you. I can definitely see why Nunyan would call her a life-changing fear factor, considering the huge wrath she's placed everyone around her in. She makes me quite envious in some ways, which I have to say is fairly hard to do, and I love her for that. Of course, we can't move on to the next section without bringing up the one and only Light Yagami. I'm sure you've heard the name at some point in your life, the young soul wielding the key to his ideal world being the Death Note, a demonic journal gifted to him by the power of Ryuk, giving him the power to eliminate anyone from any distance at any time he pleases. He plays it safe at first by wiping out those who might come off as problematic to everyone. That is, until his power and the circumstances start rising up to his neck, and that's where he gets his first taste of the dark side. From there, he makes it his new mission to wipe out anyone who would dare stand in his way and be seen by him as more of a threat than he could bear. But while he spends his time planning 2 steps ahead of everyone else, little does he realize this dark taste would catch up with him more and more over time, driving him into a pit of sheer madness, and partially dragging Misa down with him. And yet, it can be seen either way whether or not Light was actually in the wrong. If you think about it, who knows how many others would follow the same route as him had they been given the privilege of this power? Light in some ways can be seen as one of many examples how far one can go with this ability, seeing the many twisted, dark paths he'd be willing to make for himself and his victims. It's quite fascinating to see the insanity that can potentially build up when one is gifted this skill, just to see how it could be handled, and to see how far it would take them, both in terms of progress and their dark journey, and even when their outcome will finally do them in at the end of it all. It's rather nice to see how extreme an exhibit Light ended up going down this path, and I do appreciate the planning he put into this, just to see what kind of mark he could leave on the society around him, even if it turned out fearful for everyone around him. By now, some of you may think this is quite the deep variety we've been going through here. But wouldn't you know, we've been merely digging at ankle length this whole time. There's a lot more fear to uncover here than you might have realized. Ooh. But alas, I don't think we'll have much time to go through many more of these. Though, before we wrap this up, I would like to share a few of my personal picks that I feel should be given a special spotlight of their own. Starting with something a little simple, like Blood Sea, to which we were given a multi-layered treat all in one particular branch of the story. In this instance, Saya has to encounter a variety of rafts laid out and planned by Fumito, consisting of a ravenous statue and an army of giant psychotic rabbits. While these obstacles are wonderfully vicious and of course deadly to a handful of the locals, Saya had yet to realize she'd be the one to pay the price through a matter of betrayal and a few big losses. Oh, the poor girl can't seem to catch a break, and so many residents have lost their lives through some rather interesting manners as a result. Oh, the grim outcome of it all. I simply crave this, I swear I can hardly contain myself. And what's this? Berserk? Ah, now there's an atmosphere I've been longing to see for myself. Notice the face appearing on that behemoth, and see how it instantly starts screaming and crying out in agony, and how those whales change the environment completely to that astral realm, a land that only abstract fears could ever dream to come from. I greatly admire the nature provided from this atmosphere. Just looking at all those tortured souls painting the sky above and paving the land beneath. The beings who are summoned there don't know what's coming for them, as the creatures are summoned by the fear that hangs around them, as well as the vulnerable state they feel themselves in from this new area. It makes these beings seem like ideal forms of prey for them, especially since they have little chance of seeing their old land and feeling their sanity ever again. For that matter, they have little chance of even making it out alive. What could ever compare with this masterpiece? Well, I can think of something. In some parts, the tale of Steins Gate contains a slightly similar feel to what you'd get from the likes of Groundhog Day, as Okabe forces himself to reset his days over and over again, only to meet the same outcome each time, being forced to witness the deliciously unbearable demise of his close friend Mayuri, and most of these being through the forces of CERN. Okabe thought for the longest time he and his team were set to uncover a groundbreaking time travel experiment that could serve as a greater good for him and his team, or maybe in some ways serve as a good outlook for society, only for him to have to sacrifice that girl he cared oh so greatly for in the process. And not only that, he was forced to remember this tragedy as he watches it play out over and over again. But try as he might, he just couldn't seem to save Mayuri from that fate so easily, and the variety was sure to leave him in a fairly scarring fate for a while, having to witness all this himself each and every single time. Oh my, the feeling's coming back, and I can feel it growing from within. I should try to wrap this up soon. Despite his efforts, I'm sure Okabe would have never expected he'd have to encounter this same horrendous time loop a second time in his life either. So now he's stuck losing Mayuri through multiple occurrences during more than one period in his life. And one could only imagine the torment this soul encountered those few days in his young life. We may have been through a healthy blend of fears today, and these may seem like quite a fairly balanced nightmare for some of you out there, but do bear in mind this was all just a mere fraction of the fears that sprouted from the anime realm. And if you thought these memories were scary enough on their own, oh, dear mortals, you have no idea what lies in the deepest pits of this realm. If we were to stay put for even longer, maybe then you could truly understand the power that comes from these eerie moments. But again, I need to look over my own being and try to ease off this abrupt feeling that's been coming over me. Although, if there are any fears you have from this realm that I never got to share, feel free to submit them to me through the comments, or some other mortal methods you may have. It could certainly do me some good to know what else makes your blood go cold and your skin crawl, and there's always the chance I may return and explore those exact horrors you anime fans out there might have experienced from your own past. We can only hope. But for now, I'll leave you to whatever sanity remains within your own being. Be sure to watch your back from all those spooky memories, for they might sneak up on you and even corner you from every direction if you're not careful. Happy Halloween, mortals!